What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. And today we're previewing free agency once again for the New York Giants. Today, taking a look at the cornerback position and ranking our top 3 to 4 cornerbacks that we think the New York Giants should target in free agency this offseason. Now, obviously, the cornerback position is of major need to the Giants. Their CB1 this past year, Deonte Banks, did not look like a CB1 at really any point during the season. Got beat up on all year long, and the Giants really missed having a true stable veteran quality presence in that secondary. Yes, they signed Adoree Jackson just prior to the start of the regular season. No, that was not a legitimate upgrade to their secondary. This offseason, we want to see them legitimately upgrade, spend some money at that position, and actually sign a good, high-quality starting veteran cornerback, and we're going to go ahead and take a look at who that player could be. But before we do, Alex, how you doing today, my friend? And who's the cornerback that you are first eyeing for the Giants in free agency?
I'm doing pretty good, man. And listen, the Giants, they got a lot of work to do. And I just wrote an article about their cap space situation. They have about $48 million in salary space. If you take about $10 million off, they're about $38 million, $10 million going towards the draft class, obviously. But next year, in 2026, they have almost $150 million in available salary space. And I tweeted this, and I want to get your opinion on it, Anthony. The idea of having a rookie quarterback on a rookie contract, $100 million in cap space, and a couple of linchpin pieces like Brian Burns, Dexter Lawrence, Malik Neighbors, and, Andrew Thomas locked in on long-term deals, some of them extensions, some of them rookie contracts. I mean, like that's got to make you feel pretty good, right? Like having the idea of just having a rookie quarterback on that rookie deal and all that money to spend to upgrade and all your draft capital for the future. That's got to feel pretty good. That's got to feel like where good teams start when it comes to rebuilding an organization. Having all that money, the quarterback solve with a rookie contract, and the ability to go out and get proven commodities to fill weaknesses. Not to mention draft BPA every single year there on out because you have your quarterback already. That sounds like a really good plan and one that I personally get behind. But one of those big weaknesses that they should be addressing with some of this financial freedom is cornerback. And I think that they should go after one of the top 2 guys. Because personally, Deonte Banks, I think he's a good player in terms of the upside. He could be great. But they got to get him a running mate, man. They got to get him something that instills confidence, that's going to develop him as a leader, that's going to give him that backing. I think DJ Reed is the perfect player for that. He did it with the Jets. He was a really good running mate alongside Sauce Gardner, and they're going to miss him a lot over there, in my opinion. Now, he's going to get paid like a top cornerback because he is a top cornerback, but he's an all-effort guy. He's a really nice galvanizing factor in the locker room. I think he's a perfect fit for the Giants. He doesn't have to move. He can stay in New York. He knows what it's like to play in MetLife. He knows what it's like to play with the bright lights of this media market. I think DJ Reed is a really solid player, 28 years old. Like I said, he's going to get paid like a really solid player. Gave up 431 yards this past season on a 58.3% reception rate. Gave up 2 touchdowns, that's 7 pass breakups. Now, over the course of his career with the Jets, he's been excellent. He was great with Seattle too. He had a couple of good, up-and-coming seasons with San Francisco before he really took on the role as a starter. But this is a guy that's in his prime, and I think that you pair him with a guy like Deonte Banks, they can grow alongside each other as a unit. I really think that this is a good fit for the Giants, and I'm willing to pay for it because they need someone like this. Their secondary is too young, it's too inexperienced, and it's too weak. They need a guy that's older. They need a veteran presence, but not too old. He's not a 30, not a 31-year-old, but a 28-year-old in his prime. This is the perfect type of guy you pay long-term, and the Giants have the financial freedom. They have the money. I think that they should make this type of move, in my opinion. Anthony, I know there's other options we're going to discuss. DJ Reed, by far, I wouldn't say by far. I like Travarius, we'll discuss him too, but he's certainly at the top of my list.
He's near the top of my list. I actually think that I do prefer Travarius Ward as my number 1 cornerback in this free agency class, but I think DJ Reed is excellent when you look at his body of work across 3 different teams. Being a solid player for 3 different teams in your career indicates that environment doesn't really matter to you. You can compete and play well anywhere at a high level, and I think that's important to note for DJ Reed. If he were to sign with a new team, being the New York Giants this offseason, because he's made that switch to 3 other teams in the past, you can expect him to make that switch A-OK and continue to compete at a high level. Plus, he stays in a stadium where he just found a lot of success for the last 3 seasons in MetLife playing for the New York Jets. What I really like about DJ Reed, you look at the 3 years that he was producing there. This past season, though, I thought he got off to a really hot start. He dealt with some injuries, as the Jets did all across the board in that secondary, and that ultimately caused him to fall back a little bit to the second half of the season. But throughout the first half of the season, Reed was playing like one of the best cornerbacks really in the NFL through the first few matchups, and he was getting his hand on a lot of passes. He really wasn't allowing any of the passes into his coverage to be completed. Had a phenomenal performance in week 4 against Denver, where he was targeted 6 times and let up only 1 reception for -4 yards. Like, he is capable of having those really elite performances on any given Sunday. He never really gives up a bunch of yards after the catch. He's a fine tackler. He's a player that I really like. Now, it comes down to price tag, and what would that price tag look like? And if you're taking PFF's projections on contracts, which I think they have the best projections of contracts, and a lot of people like to use the spot rack market value, that's good, but I think PFF is actually a little bit better. They project a 3-year deal worth $42 million total, $14 million per season for DJ Reed. Alex, before we jump into Travarius Ward, $14 million per season for DJ Reed at 28 years old. Is that a good deal to you? For me personally, like you just said, all that financial freedom that they have in the future, that's going to look like a drop in the bucket long term, especially considering the way the salary cap keeps rising every single year. I actually think he could come in a little bit above that projected price tag, but if it's at $14 million per year, I think that would be an excellent signing.
Dude, if DJ Reed is $14 million per year, I'm signing that contract today. That's a really good contract for a guy who can be your CB1. I think it probably comes in higher than that personally. And I'm willing to pay higher than that to get a player of that magnitude because we need it. Like, we have to overpay right now for guys that are going to be good players for us, guys that are going to be leaders in this locker room. We lost Saquon. We lost McKinney, 2 of our best leaders on both sides of the ball. Reed is a leader. He is going to help Deonte Banks get there. He's going to be a galvanizing force in a unit that has Tyler Nubin, Banks, Andrew, so young, so young. Priority number 1 or 2 or 3, one of those top 3 priorities has to be getting a veteran corner. And Travarius Ward's the next logical step, in this progression of players we're going to discuss. But DJ Reed is the best player in this instance, in my opinion. He's going to cost it, but Travarius Ward certainly is a very good player, and he's been to multiple Super Bowls. So I do think that, in terms of experience, in terms of leadership, in terms of galvanizing force, Travarius Ward is right up there with me, or DJ Reed too. Like, he is a guy that is going to help that unit become matured. And I think that they need someone like the coaches can't do it all the time. Coaches aren't on the field. Deonte Banks has got to look right to his left or look right to his right and see a guy like Reed, see a guy like Ward, and be like, yeah, like that guy's gonna make a play. Or I'm gonna make a play and they're gonna come running up to me hyped and energetic and leading and be the guy that sets the tone, sets the example. Banks, we saw so much low confidence last year. He wasn't celebrating. He did not care at times. We saw the lack of effort on the film. Those things are unacceptable. Someone's got to hold him accountable, and it's got to be a veteran like a Reed, like a Ward, in my opinion, that's holding him accountable. Because the coaches, Dable reaming him out on the sideline, it's not working, right? Jerome Henderson got fired, wasn't working. They need a leader on that team that is a player that's going to help a guy like Banks build that confidence. McKinney was that guy, but they didn't let him. They let him go. McKinney was that guy. They need someone to come in and help Banks get back to what he can be and what we saw as a rookie. They got to pay either Ward or DJ Reed, in my opinion. There really is no other option.
I agree with you, and listen, you kind of just talked up Travarius Ward. Like I said, he would be my number 1 cornerback that I target in this offseason. You mentioned it, playoff experience, championship pedigree. He has all that. He's only played for great NFL teams in his NFL career so far. Played for the Kansas City Chiefs for the first 4 seasons of his career, and then spent 3 years with the San Francisco 49ers. I want that kind of a player. A guy who has hung in there and competed with the best of the best on the biggest stage year in and year out. That's what the Giants need. A guy with that level of experience, championship experience, some rings on his finger, a guy who's competed at the highest level and has been a major part of that team that won the Super Bowl success. I want Travarius Ward on this team. I think the experience, the leadership, all of those things combined, he is the perfect fit for the Giants. Plus, he's a really damn good player. Guys, don't fall into the trap of just looking at his latest season, seeing his low PFF grade, and thinking that he's washed up. Go beyond the numbers. Google Travarius Ward. Do some research on what he went through this past season. The fact that he even played this past season is a testament to his love for the game and to his desire to be great, because a lot of people probably can't continue to do their job going through the trauma that he was going through this past year. I love Travarius Ward. I think that him coming back on a new team next season and having a great season would be such a hell of a success story. I really am rooting for the guy wherever he goes. I don't even care if he signs in the division. I'm rooting for Travarius Ward to be a successful player or continue to be a successful player from here on out. But I really would love for it to be with the New York Giants. They need a leader. They need a great locker room presence. He's both of those things, and they need a clutch postseason performer. Travarius Ward fits the bill on all accounts. Now, Alex, like I did with DJ Reed, again, I pretty much came in an agreement with you on Travarius Ward, but let's talk about price tag. They actually project a very similar contract over on PFF for Travarius Ward at $14.5 million per season. So not just 14, but 14.5 with a little bit lower guarantees, actually. They projected 27.5 in guarantees for DJ Reed and only 25 for Travarius Ward. I have to imagine that is because he's coming off of a down year. He'll probably get a little bit less guarantees. But again, coming off of that down season, this is a player who I think is so much better talent-wise than what was demonstrated on the football field in 2024. I think if you sign him for around that 14 to 15 to $16 million price range, like Reed, in a couple years, that could look like an absolute bargain, especially considering how good of a player Travarius Ward was the 2 seasons prior, ranking in the top 10 and top 5 in PFF grade the 2 prior seasons, and also just being a championship winning cornerback. Like, he's got it all. That would be my number one signing, but what are your thoughts on that potential price tag in that $14 to $16 million range?
I'm fine with that price tag, and the reason is when you look at his stats, Anthony, you see an elevation in performance. Since 2018 to 2023, every year he was getting better and better and better and better. And then 2024, obviously, you mentioned exactly what happened to him. And I think we can label that as an anomaly. I think we can cough that one up as, yeah, that's not normal Travarius Ward. He was dealing with some stuff that was bigger than football. And I think that I'm willing to just forget about 2024. Like, that's how my mentality is when it comes to something that serious. I am just forgetting about that season. This is a guy who's been, like I said, multiple Super Bowls he's been to. He's won Super Bowls. He knows what a great team looks like. He knows what a galvanizing force looks like. The question is he going to want to go from one of the best defenses in football to one of the worst? You know what I mean? Like, is he going to do that? Now, what that means is he's got to get the price tag he wants. And I honestly think, when you're looking at, the Giants at the moment, they're going to have to overpay for players like this to get better. But that's okay, because there's 2 reasons why I'm okay overpaying players right now. 1, I do think they're going to draft a quarterback and they're going to have this rookie window. 2, overpaying players right now it's going to look like a normal, even a bargain contract in 2 or 3 years. You know what I mean? Like, what you're paying right now is today's price is not tomorrow's price, especially in the NFL with the cap rising. Over $20 million it's rising. So the price tags are naturally going to go up. They feel more expensive. They're just nominal cost to what the actual cap space is. But if you can get a player like this at 14, 15 mil per season for, let's say, a 3-year deal, 4-year deal with an out after the 3rd season. He's 28 years old right now. He's about 7 months older than DJ Reed, so I still do prefer Reed, but I'm not upset if we get Ward. If you go even for a 3-year deal, out after the 2nd season, maybe that's something that the Giants could swing. That contract will look a lot cheaper in a couple seasons. That contract will look better as time goes on. So that's kind of the case with most deals these days. Like, they're being signed, and like 2 years later, like, oh wow, like that's not that bad. Dexter Lawrence is a good example of that. I'm sure Brian Burns will be as well. As pass, especially when Micah Parsons gets paid, Brian Burns is going to look like a pretty cheap deal. So I do think, we're going to see these things kind of unfold naturally. But Travarius Ward is a leader. He's an experienced player. He's an experienced winning player, and he's coming off a major anomaly season that was impacted by something bigger than football. I think that if his price tag is impacted by that at all, the Giants should be looking to capitalize, because they need to, and they have to get these really solid players on the most cost-efficient deals they can possibly get. Ward may be one of those types of guys. I don't know what their contracts will end up looking like. 14 mil feels a little low to me for both of these players. But if that was a realistic number, I would sign that tomorrow and be very, very happy because I think that they're going to be able to help Deontay Banks to a point. And if the Giants do get better, do improve, Banks will end up becoming a CB1. He's that talented. He just needs that push. He just needs that leader to help him get there. And then you're looking at a good situation where you have two CB1 caliber corners on your team, but they need to get Banks where he needs to be, and they've got to sign a player like this to help him get there.
I agree with you. I think that Banks really needed to be a CB2 in his second season. I think really needs to be in his third season, so hopefully the Giants can address the cornerback position, get a CB1, and allow Banks to just kind of play that secondary role. Honestly, CB2s, Alex, in this division, they still face some serious competition. You know, it's not like the CB1 does all of the heavy lifting against the Eagles. Yeah, you've got A.J. Brown. You've also got Devontae Smith to worry about. Oh, against Washington, sure, you've got Terry McLaurin and whoever they sign in free agency this offseason with their $150 million that they're probably going to drop a bag on a T. Higgins or some other superstar wide receiver. So the Giants need to have two good cornerbacks going into 2025 in order to compete in this division, which, as we've discussed, it's going to be really difficult for them anyway because two of the best teams in the league reside in the NFC East right now. And we really don't know what the Cowboys are going to be at this point. But we know that the Giants are going to be fighting an uphill battle. And for that reason, they need to target some cornerback talent in order to compete with these loaded wide receivers. But Alex, I know that there was another cornerback that you had a take on that you wanted to discuss. Who's that next guy on the list for you?
So the next guy on the list for me is Paulson Adebo from the New Orleans Saints. Now, Adebo coming off a year where he fractured his leg, I believe. He had a fractured bone. That sucks. Like, you're, definitely set back from that. But this is a player who has been getting better over time. He played 948 snaps last year for New Orleans and gave up 753 yards, 1 touchdown, 4 interceptions, and 11 pass breakups. So he had a pretty solid year. Now, I do think this is a tier 2 level player, but why I do like him is he's 25 years old, and he's not going to cost you that much money. He's going to be a much more affordable contract compared to DJ Reed and Travarius Ward. I still want to go for one of the tier 1 guys, but, obviously beggars can't be choosers. So I think that if we miss out on one of those, Adebo is a solid backup plan. He's not a CB1 caliber guy, in my opinion. He's a CB2 caliber guy. So the Giants would have 2 CB2s basically, and hoping that one of them elevates their game to CB1 status, which is not the preferable method of kind of addressing this position, but it is a solution to a position that needs an upgrade, needs a proven experienced player. So Adebo obviously is tier 2 for me, but he was having a pretty solid season before the injury, which is why I am optimistic that he can bounce back and maybe there is upside for him to get to that CB1 status. Obviously there's another player you have in mind here, Anthony, but I'll let you address Adebo before you get to the fourth and final option here.
Yeah, before I get to the fourth and final option, for Adebo, I think you're right. This is not a guy that I think fixes what the Giants need, which is a lack of a true number 1 cornerback. However, this season, he would have had that opportunity to be a number 1 cornerback week in and week out. However, he got injured. Like you said, this was the year for him after they traded Marshawn Lattimore, the New Orleans Saints did. Adebo really could have ascended into that role and just missed out on that opportunity. What I will say about him, which I think you mentioned, he's only 25 and a half years old. So he is one of the younger, if not the youngest option on the free agency market for the New York Giants to consider. Like these other guys that we've been mentioning are 27, 28 years old. These are guys who are more experienced veterans, but Adebo is one of those players who is still ascending. And I think that's important to note. If you look at Joe Shane and what he really values in his free agents, it's guys who are ascending. Bobby Okereke had not reached his limit when the Giants signed him. He was still ascending. He was only 25-ish years old. Same thing with John Runyon last year. The high-ticketed free agents that Joe Shane likes to target are guys who are still ascending. And that I use that term in particular, Alex, still ascending, because that is what he said of Brian Burns last year when they traded for him, as we saw in Hard Knocks. He said, yeah, we could go after one of these guys on the market, but we're going to trade for Burns because we think he's still ascending. We're not only paying him for what he's done, but for what we think he's capable of doing in the future, because we think there's still growth and potential to unlock. And Adebo fits that billing, Alex. So that's a good target that you picked out there as a 25-year-old. Fits what Joe Shane looks for, a guy who's still growing and has yet to reach his potential. I think he could be very interesting for the New York Giants. You're right, maybe he's not a CB1 right now. Maybe in this environment he could be, maybe he can't be. I don't know. Adds more risk to him as a free agency signing and target. However, if you hit on it, we're talking about some of these other contracts being a bargain. That could be the major one considering he's only 25 years old. And I will just throw in there, Asante Samuel Jr. is in that same group of players who's 25 and still ascending. His 2 seasons prior to 2024 were great. He had over 1,000 snaps played in both of those years for the Chargers, and he was getting better year in and year out and was a pretty good cover corner. This past season was injured for the majority of the year and fell out of favor because the Chargers miraculously hit on 2 mid-round, like a 4th and a 5th round draft pick at the cornerback position back to back. Those are their starters now. So Asante Samuel Jr. will also be on the free agency market. He is a guy that I would look at as for the New York Giants also, just because of his age and his potential to continue to grow. Problem with him, though, he missed like 22% of tackles last year. Guy can't tackle for shit, but he is a really good cover corner. So Asante Samuel, I'll throw on that list. But the final guy that I did want to mention was Byron Murphy Jr., also a guy who I think is ascending. Now, he's a little bit older at 27, but he's freshly 27, just turned that age this month. And I think when you look at his career trajectory, drafted by the Arizona Cardinals, did not play particularly well during his tenure with the Cardinals. But when he made the trip over to Minnesota, switched there, started playing under Brian Flores' defense this past offseason, looked like a brand new player. And so I think the argument here for Byron Murphy is get him some good coaching and watch him flourish. And I think he's going to get paid highly because of what he did in Flores' defense last year. He was really a crucial part of their system. And what I really like about him, Alex, the Giants had 5 total interceptions forced last year. Byron Murphy had 6 on his own. Like, the guy has great ball skills. The ball is in his area. He's either breaking it up or he's going to haul it in himself. And I do think the Giants need a player with that particular skill. That is by far Deonte Banks' biggest weakness, in my opinion. He never gets his head around in time. Oftentimes, he's right there. The coverage is perfect, but he doesn't have the ball skills to actually break up the pass. Byron Murphy doesn't have that problem. Maybe sometimes he's not always there in perfect lockstep coverage, but if the ball is in range, he's going to get his hand on it. And I do think there's some value to be placed on that. That's why I think he's actually going to get paid quite nicely on the free agency market. And I think he's going to be under consideration for the Giants as a 27-year-old who's coming off a season with 26 interceptions from a coach in Brian Flores, who they really respect. What are your thoughts on Byron Murphy and kind of that idea that maybe they value certain traits in different cornerbacks, ball skills being maybe the highest value trait?
Yeah, so, one of the things that I like about Byron Murphy is, yes, he gets his head around, he picks up interceptions, he's a very aggressive cornerback. What I don't like about Byron Murphy and what I think the Giants will probably be turned off by is, like you mentioned, his tackle rate is very bad. He has a 16.2% missed tackle rate. It's the highest of any cornerback we've discussed so far. The Giants had problems on the outside this past season with the run defense. Teams ran outside, they destroyed them, the edge was never sealed. They really struggled when teams were running on the outside, and having a cornerback that is a liability in that regard may not be in their best interest, but sometimes you have to weigh the pros and the cons here. Is that going to be something that, deters them, or do they value his ability to create turnovers more highly than his ability to stop the run? These are things that do weight differently depending on what type of defense they want to run next year. Shane Bowen is being retained, obviously, so I feel as though whatever we saw this past year will probably be the same. I think they want to strengthen the outside, and that's why Travarius Ward actually makes a lot of sense for them in that regard, because he is a tremendous run stopper. This is a guy that has a really, really good run defense. So on the outside, he's going to be a great tackler for you. He gets involved. And one thing, if you ever watched the 49ers play, and we've seen them play the Giants a couple times, they rally to the football, man. Those guys are like heat-seeking missiles. They fly to the ball, and they tackle with perfect form. Travarius Ward's one of those guys that's going to show up, and he's going to overhaul your run defense on his side of the ball immediately, and he's going to demand that level of run defense from Deonte Banks too. So, helping in that regard, giving Deonte Banks some of the training he's gotten from KC, some of the training he's gotten from the 49ers in terms of run defense specifically would be really, really, really good. But I do think that will play a bigger role than just interceptions. I think the Giants want to have a more balanced approach instead of selling out for a specific metric. But Byron Murphy obviously is tier 2 here. We're not talking about him in the same breath as Travarius Ward. So, very different player, very, very different price tag. If they don't manage to get Ward, I do think that Byron Murphy could be a possible solution. I personally would go with Paulson Adebo over Murphy, just because I think his game has a little bit more upside, a little bit more balance to it. But Murphy as a last resort option on the tier 2 list, certainly something I would be considering, certainly is something I would be looking at, if I was the Giants and trying to find a solution here, because God knows it, like, they need another veteran there with experience alongside Banks. And honestly, like, if they're not the most, and the problem is, like, we're not a really big destination team right now, so we may have to settle for a player like Byron Murphy is kind of the reality.
You just said it right there. We're not a big destination team, which is why the New York Giants will settle on Rasul Douglas in free agency, the 29-year-old cornerback who's going to get paid like a CB1, but probably isn't anymore. That's going to be the Giants' big signing. I'm predicting it now. I don't even think that would be a bad signing by any means necessary. He has great experience, and he has been a really good player in the past. Just had a real struggle in 2024. I think injuries played a part in that as well, as they did all over the Buffalo Bills defense. But hey, we know that the Giants like their Bills guys. I don't think they ever actually coached Rasul Douglas. I think he was with the Packers when Brian Dable and Joe Shane were with Buffalo, but still, he plays for Buffalo now, so I think they'll have their eye on him. And hey, he is one of the top cornerbacks in the market as well. This is a pretty rich free agency class of cornerbacks. We mentioned about 5 or 6 guys here. I threw in Asante Samuel Jr. We talked about a lot of these guys. We're really only scratching the surface. There's still Carlton Davis out there. There's still Mike Hilton and Stephon Gilmore, Jonathan Jones, Nate Hobbs. Like, there's a lot of guys on this free agency market at the cornerback position. So one way or another, the New York Giants will absolutely address this position in free agency. We're just going to try our best over the next few weeks to continue to dive into all of these guys, give you our takes on them and analysis on them, so that when the Giants do make that signing, you're like, oh yeah, I remember that guy. Fireside Giants talked about him. I know what his strengths and weaknesses are, what his profile is like. So that's our goal here over the next few weeks as we prepare ourselves and all of you for free agency. So make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you're listening to Apple or Spotify, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, we'll catch you on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.